Under the dim light, I stood frozen as my greedy husband demanded I sell my $5 million inheritance. His cold, unwavering voice cut through the tension. "You have no choice, Rachel," he hissed, his eyes narrowing with frustration that quickly turned to rage. Before I could respond, he grabbed a wooden stick from the wall and struck me hard across the head. I fainted instantly. When I woke up, I found myself hanging from a tree, my arms and legs tightly bound with rough ropes. The pressure on my pregnant belly was excruciating, and each breath felt like a battle. Nearby, Ethan stood with a cruel smirk, watching me struggle, waiting for me to give in. "My name is Rachel, and I'm 30 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and work as a graphic designer for a growing advertising agency. A year ago, I married Ethan, a 34-year-old entrepreneur who seemed like the perfect partner. He was charming, ambitious, and supportive, celebrating every milestone in my career and talking about building a beautiful future together. Things took a turn when I inherited my late grandfather's estate, an expansive property worth $5 million. The property had been in my family for generations, and I always saw it as a legacy for my future children. Initially, Ethan seemed happy for me, praising my family's achievements and talking about how we could preserve its significance. However, his interest in the property soon grew into an obsession. He started bringing it up in conversations, casually at first. "We could do so much with the money from selling it," he said once. "Imagine what we could achieve." I brushed off his comments, thinking he was simply sharing ideas. But over time, his tone changed. His admiration for my independence faded, replaced by persistent suggestions that we sell the property. He framed it as a way to secure bigger dreams for our family. But something about his insistence felt wrong. I began to sense that his motives were not as noble as he claimed. Despite my growing unease, I held my ground. The property wasn't just land to me. It was a part of my heritage, a symbol of my family's hard work and perseverance. I couldn't let go of something so important, no matter how much Ethan pressured me. What started as subtle conversations became arguments that left me questioning the man I had married. The loving, supportive partner I thought I knew was showing a side of himself I never expected, a side that would soon turn my life into a nightmare. Ethan's obsession with the property grew more apparent each day. What started as gentle suggestions turned into persistent demands. He began bringing up the topic at every opportunity, framing it as the logical thing to do. "Rachel, selling the property would solve so many problems. It's a smart decision," he would say, his tone laced with impatience. I stood firm. "Ethan, I've told you before. That property isn't just about money. It's a part of my family's legacy, and I won't sell it." His frustration started to bleed into other parts of our relationship. The once loving man who praised my independence now dismissed my decisions. He would make remarks about how I didn't care about our future and accuse me of being selfish. The man I married seemed to be disappearing, replaced by someone cold and manipulative. One evening during dinner, his control reached a breaking point. We were seated at the table when he brought up the property again. "We need to sell it, Rachel," he said firmly, swirling his glass of wine. "Letting it sit there unused is irresponsible." I set my fork down and looked him in the eye.
No, Ethan.
"We've discussed this. I'm not selling it." His jaw tightened and his voice grew sharper. "You're being unreasonable. This is about us, our family. Why can't you see that?" "This isn't just about us," I replied, my voice steady. "That property is for our child's future. I won't let you take that away." His face darkened, and he slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. "You think you can make all the decisions, don't you? Do you even care about me?" "Of course I care, Ethan. But I won't be bullied into this." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You'll regret this," he spat, storming out of the room. For the first time, I felt a chilling fear settle in my chest. The man I once trusted was no longer the partner I thought he was. Something dangerous was simmering beneath the surface. The tension between us continued to escalate over the next few days. Ethan grew colder and more distant, his once subtle manipulation turning into outright hostility. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the property, his tone becoming more aggressive with each refusal. One night, everything came to a head. Ethan returned home late, his mood already foul. I was sitting in the living room, hoping to avoid another argument, but it was inevitable. "We need to talk," he said sharply, standing in the doorway. I sighed, bracing myself. "Ethan, if this is about the property again." "It is," he interrupted, his voice hard and unrelenting. "And I'm done asking nicely. You're going to sell it." "No," I replied firmly, standing my ground. "I've told you, Ethan. That property is not for sale. I won't repeat myself." His face twisted in anger, and he stormed across the room, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you can just ignore me? You think this is all about you?" His voice rose with every word, the anger spilling out unchecked. "Ethan, calm down," I pleaded, stepping back. "This isn't the way." Before I could finish, he grabbed a wooden stick that had been leaning against the wall. His eyes burned with fury as he raised it high. "You'll learn to listen," he growled. The blow came down hard on my head, the impact sending a shock wave of pain through my skull. My vision blurred, and I stumbled backward before collapsing to the floor. Everything around me faded to black. When I awoke, the world was unrecognizable. My arms and legs were tightly bound with rough ropes, and I was hanging from a tree. The rough fibers bit into my skin, and the weight pressed painfully against my pregnant belly. Fear coursed through me as I realized Ethan was standing nearby, watching me with a cruel smirk. "Now," he said mockingly, "are you ready to sell the property? Or do you need more convincing?" Terror gripped me, but I knew I had to stay strong for myself, for my child. The ropes cut into my wrists and ankles, their coarse fibers burning my skin with every movement. My body hung awkwardly from the tree, the weight pressing painfully on my pregnant belly. I struggled to breathe, my heart racing with terror as Ethan loomed nearby. "Still think you're in charge, Rachel?" he sneered, leaning against the tree trunk. "You've got two options: agree to sell the property or stay there until you change your mind." His words felt like daggers, each one sinking deeper into my chest. I fought the urge to cry, knowing my tears would only fuel his sadistic satisfaction. "Ethan, please," I begged, my voice trembling. "Think about our baby. You don't have to do this." He stepped closer, his face twisted with anger and disdain. "Our baby," he spat. "Don't try to guilt me, Rachel. You're the one who pushed me to this. You could end all of this right now, just sell the property." His indifference to my pain was terrifying, but I couldn't let him see my fear. I glanced at the ropes binding my wrists, noticing the knot wasn't as tight as it seemed. Hope flickered inside me, but I had to move carefully. Any sudden motion could draw his attention. As Ethan turned away, muttering to himself about my stubbornness, I began twisting my wrists. The rope scraped against my skin, but I gritted my teeth and kept working. Every small movement brought me closer to freedom. "Don't even think about trying anything," Ethan snapped, his back still turned. My heart pounded, but I didn't stop. The knot loosened just enough, and with one final desperate pull, my hands came free. I quickly untied the ropes around my ankles and lowered myself to the ground. Ethan turned around just as I bolted into the darkness of the woods. His furious shouts echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. Survival was all that mattered now for me and my baby. The cold night air stung my face as I ran through the dense woods, branches scratching my arms and legs. My heart pounded like a drum, adrenaline pushing me forward despite the pain coursing through my body. Behind me, Ethan's angry shouts grew louder. "Rachel, you can't get away from me," he bellowed, his voice full of rage. I didn't dare look back. My only focus was putting as much distance between us as possible. The woods were dark, the uneven ground threatening to trip me at every step. But I kept moving. Each stumble sent a jolt through my pregnant belly, but I refused to stop. My child's life, and mine, depended on escaping. Ethan's footsteps grew closer, his voice cutting through the night like a predator's growl. "You think you're smart? You'll regret this, Rachel." I ducked behind a large tree, crouching low to catch my breath. My hands trembled as I pressed them against the rough bark, praying Ethan wouldn't find me. His footsteps slowed, and I heard him muttering curses as he searched. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I fought to stay silent. When his footsteps moved farther away, I seized my chance. I bolted again, this time heading toward what I hoped was the edge of the woods. My legs burned with exhaustion, but a faint glow ahead gave me hope. It was a road. Pushing through the last tangle of branches, I stumbled onto the asphalt. In the distance, headlights approached. Waving my arms desperately, I stepped into the car's path. The vehicle screeched to a halt, and the driver, a kind older man, jumped out. "Are you okay?" he asked, his face full of concern. "My husband," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "He tried to kill me." The man didn't hesitate. He helped me into his car and sped toward the nearest police station. For the first time in hours, I felt a glimmer of safety. But I knew the nightmare wasn't over yet. Ethan had to face justice. The police station buzzed with quiet urgency as I sat in a small room, trembling and clutching a blanket someone had draped over my shoulders. Officers listened intently as I recounted everything: the argument, Ethan's violent attack, and my desperate escape through the woods. Each word felt like reliving the nightmare, but I knew I had to be strong. "My husband tied me to a tree," I said, my voice cracking. "He threatened me to sell the property, and when I refused, he hit me. He didn't care about our baby." My hands trembled as I described the brutality. The officer sitting across from me nodded solemnly, his pen flying across a notepad. "We'll take it from here, ma'am. You're safe now. Let's get you to a doctor to ensure you and your baby are okay." Henry, the kind man who had rescued me, stayed long enough to give his statement. "She was terrified," he told the officers. "Bruised, bloodied, and desperate. No one fakes that kind of fear." At the hospital, doctors examined me carefully. They confirmed that my baby was unharmed despite the ordeal, though I had a mild concussion and deep bruising. Their reassurances brought a wave of relief, but the thought of Ethan's actions still made my stomach turn. Back at the police station, the investigation moved swiftly. Officers collected evidence from our home: the wooden stick Ethan had used, the ropes he had tied me with, and photos of the tree where I had been suspended. Henry's testimony and my injuries painted a damning picture. Ethan was arrested the next morning. He claimed innocence, trying to twist the story to make himself the victim, but his lies quickly unraveled under scrutiny. As my father arrived from New York to support me, I felt a surge of determination. Ethan had tried to take everything from me: my freedom, my future, and my child's safety. I would make sure he paid for his crimes. Justice was no longer a hope, it was a promise. The day of the trial arrived. I stood at the entrance of the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his once confident posture replaced by nervous attention. His eyes flickered to me as I entered, but I refused to look away. I took my seat on the witness stand, my hands trembling in my lap. The prosecutor, a woman named Miss Thompson, stood to my left, her expression firm and determined. She addressed the court with the clarity of someone who had seen too many victims of abuse. "Mrs. Williams," she began, turning to me, "please tell the court what happened the night of the attack." I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Ethan became obsessed with selling the property I inherited from my grandfather. When I refused, he became more aggressive. That night, he hit me with a wooden stick and tied me up. He hung me from a tree and told me to sell the property, or he would make me regret it. The room fell silent as the weight of my words settled over everyone. I paused, looking down at my hands, fighting back tears. "Why did you refuse to sell the property?" Miss Thompson asked. I lifted my head, meeting her eyes. It wasn't just land. It was my family's legacy. It was meant for my child. I wouldn't let him destroy that for his own gain. Ethan's lawyer tried to discredit me, calling me overly emotional. But the evidence spoke for itself: the bruises on my arms, the knots in the ropes, the photos of a tree. Everything I had told them was corroborated by the police and Henry's testimony. When it was finally over, the jury deliberated for hours. I sat in the courtroom, barely able to breathe, until the door opened and the verdict was read.
Guilty.
The weight lifted from my chest. Justice had been served. Ethan would no longer have any power over me. The courtroom fell silent as the judge raised his gavel. The defendant, Ethan Williams, is hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of early parole for assault, attempted coercion, and reckless endangerment. The sentence. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The weight of the moment finally sank in. Ethan's punishment was not just for the pain he had caused me, but for every moment he had taken from me. The fear, the control, the manipulation. Ethan's face was a mix of disbelief and anger as the verdict was read, his once confident demeanor crumbling. His lawyer tried to argue for a lesser sentence, but the judge was firm. Your actions were beyond cruel, the judge continued. You will pay for what you've done. I sat still, hardly able to process the words. This was it. This was the end of the nightmare. My mind replayed the events that led up to this point, from the first moment Ethan suggested selling the property to the terror I had felt when he attacked me. But now, I could finally breathe freely. As the court session ended, my father came over to me. He embraced me tightly, his voice thick with emotion. You did it, Rachel. You stayed strong. He'll never hurt you again. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. Outside the courthouse, the weight on my shoulders finally lifted. The sun seemed brighter. The world seemed quieter. Ethan was behind bars, and the life I had fought so hard for was finally within my reach. I still had a long road ahead of me, healing from the trauma, rebuilding my life, and preparing for my child. But I was freed. I knew one thing for certain. I would never let fear control me again. I was free. The months that followed were a blur of adjustments and new beginnings. After the trial, I returned to my job as a graphic designer. My colleagues were supportive, and though the memories of what I'd been through were still fresh, I focused on my work. The routine felt grounding. I spent a lot of time reflecting on the life I had built, and the one I wanted to create moving forward. Ethan's threats and violence no longer held power over me. The house we once shared felt empty and distant, and I knew I couldn't return to it. It had been a prison, one I had been desperate to escape. The property I had inherited became a symbol of strength. What Ethan had once seen as a source of conflict was now a place of refuge. I put the land to use, starting small projects that I had always dreamed of, gardens, a small office, and a home that would one day be a haven for my child. In those quiet moments as I worked the land, I thought about my future, my daughter's future. I imagined a life full of love, growth, and safety. Everything I had once dreamed of, but this time, it would be different. I wouldn't let anyone take that from me. The day my baby arrived was the day I realized how far I'd come. Holding my newborn daughter in my arms, I knew that no matter what I'd been through, I had made it. I had overcome the darkness and fought for my future. My child would never know the fear I had lived with, and that promise kept me going in those early days of motherhood. I made a vow. I would protect this family and this life with everything I had. We would thrive, and I would never again let fear define me. I was free. This story, at its core, is about resilience, empowerment, and the pursuit of justice in the face of betrayal and violence. Rachel's journey, from a woman who felt trapped in a marriage to someone who reclaims her power and builds a future for herself and her child, demonstrates the strength that can emerge from adversity. Throughout the narrative, Rachel's refusal to let fear control her was pivotal. Her strength to stand firm against Ethan's manipulation and violence led her to the freedom she deserved. The support of family, the truth brought to light, and the legal consequences for Ethan served as a reminder that justice can prevail, even when it seems out of reach. This story serves as a reminder to those in similar situations that no one has the right to control or harm you. There is always a path to safety, justice, and a new beginning. Rachel's determination proves that even after the darkest moments, it is possible to rebuild, find strength, and create a better future. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Your feedback means the world to me, and subscribing ensures you won't miss any future updates. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.